So we wanted to flip that as well. So we pitched them this idea, a newsroom called Documented that would cover local immigration issues in the New York area and the ground level shifts. And they loved it. And they gave us the funding to do it and helped us build our website. And we've been doing it for about 2 years now. And yeah, it's been an incredible experience. We launched the week the family separation was really causing massive headlines in the US. So we hit the ground with a lot of news to cover, and it's kind of been the same ever since.
And one of the big pieces you did is quite extensive work going to immigration courts with your reporters and tracking and just keeping an eye on things. Could you talk about what you did exactly and what you learned from that?
Yeah, so when we first launched, we knew one of the main things we wanted to cover was the immigration courts. Yeah, every major US city has an immigration court, and local journalists in general, the major newspapers, they might they might have a reporter who's dedicated to covering the criminal court, the federal criminal court, but no one is going into immigration court regularly. And for the first 2 years, immigration attorneys will know Jeff Sessions really went about completely upending decades of precedents in immigration courts nationwide. And we were covering them in this kind of piecemeal way, but we really wanted to get an understanding of like how the system had changed. You talk to immigration attorneys and they they explain to you how different things have become and how difficult they've become. But we really wanted to capture that and figure out a way to do that. So we came up with this idea. It was inspired by one of our board members, Paul Moses, who had done something similar in criminal court, where we got funding to hire 6 reporters to go to the immigration courts from morning till close every day for 3 months.
Mhm.
One would go in per day, and they would just basically alternate and try and sit in on as many individual hearings as possible. With the help of different sources, we built like an intake sheet for them to fill out for every single hearing they saw, the names of the attorney, the name of the ICE attorney, the name of the judge, um, was matter of Castro 2 mentioned, was matter of AB mentioned, things like that. And like a little bit of narrative about what they saw and the quality of the interpretation, a number of things. And over the course of 3 months, they sat in on over 200 hearings and gave us a really detailed picture of how the New York City immigration courts have changed. And it was incredible to see because, the New York immigration courts previously had this reputation as a place with a pretty high asylum grant rate. There was access to counsel through a New York City council funded program for detained immigrants. There was judges who had been at the bench for a very long time. And there was just a general feeling that the court was a place that was, I wouldn't say favorable to immigrants, but maybe more favorable than other immigration courts. And in the space of about a year and a half, the Trump administration completely reversed that. And it became incredibly difficult for a lot of immigrants going through there to win asylum. And the whole system had come to a halt, really. It was cases were getting delayed because of in absentias. Video teleconferencing had gone up dramatically. So a lot of malfunctionings were causing cases to be rescheduled and people would end up spending longer in jail. Just a myriad of issues.
Interesting. And so, how open were the judges or the ICE attorneys and having witnesses? Did they feel comfortable? How was that situation?
Yeah, that was interesting. It was a mixed bag. It was really a mixed bag. So at first, the judges were just like, "What are you doing?" We had a lot of our court reporters basically get kicked out of courtrooms because the judge had told them that you need permission from the press officer to be here. So that's just false. That's just not true. We'd spoken to the press officer. The press officer told them that told us that as long as we had permission from the respondent, we were allowed to sit in on an individual hearing. And the judges, though, were just completely unsettled by this. But it got to a point where the EOIR public information officer had sent an email to all of the judges and said that, there are reporters from Documented who are doing this project And if they have permission from an individual, from a respondent, they're allowed to sit in on a hearing. So we managed to get that permission. The ICE attorneys were another can of worms. It was there was incidents where some ICE attorneys were actually threatening our students, saying, asking them for their details and their information and looking them up, sending their information to other places. One ICE attorney became obsessed with one of our court reporters. She would follow her around the hallways and tell people to not talk to her because anything they said to her could be printed. One respondent, attorney, and judge had given the reporter permission to enter into an individual on one occasion, and she sat there waiting for it. And then this ICE attorney who kind of had a vendetta against her came in, saw that she was there, went to the respondent, told the respondent, like, you don't have to do this. Like, if you don't want this reporter here, it doesn't mean like it could hurt your case if this story ends up getting published.
The last you
The
want
respondent said
to
they were
anything.
right.
Yeah, the client, the applicant, yeah, but it's amazing.
Yeah, one to finish that, the ICE attorney ended up actually asking counsel if they could go and speak to them privately. So they left, and then they came back, and the immigration attorney said to the judge, I think it's in my client's best interest if the reporter leaves the room, and asked my reporter to leave. So we don't know what the ICE attorney said to the council at that moment, but it seems like they basically told them that I'm going to make your life difficult if the reporter is in there.
Yeah. So it just seeing some ICE attorneys, you do your job and you might have passion for it, but some of them take it to the next level. It's like police officers who are overzealous. Most police officers are not going to beat up people, but every day I open up Daily Mail. The front news today was some police officer that choked some guy to death over a forged check. And it's like, what? It's just forge a check. I mean, it's bad, but you don't have to kill a person over it. Some people just take their jobs over the top. It's crazy. So, you learn a lot about the immigration system doing this. When I started in immigration law, I would sit in on these court cases to just figure out what's going on. And you quickly realize people have a perception, what they see on television from criminal courts and federal courts, there's some sort of organization that is a nice place. But you quickly realize in immigration court that it's a kangaroo court of sorts. And it's also just a mess. There's not enough space. People just are talking over each other, paperwork everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It was for the reporters, it was an incredible experience for them. They couldn't, every day, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. One person, a judge said to an attorney once that they figured that their client couldn't make make bond, and the attorney said that, well, if you said it, then they could make bond. But it turned out the judge had granted bond, but sent it to an old address that the person hadn't lived in for about 3 years. So they'd had this bond approval for a month. They've been sitting in jail for a month, not knowing that the judge had approved bond.
Wow.
And only for the judge had to apologize in the end and say, look, I apologize to the attorney, I apologize to the client, because the correct address was in the file. So things like that, the fact that the whole system is done by paper to this day, really makes you wonder, like you said, how it's so far behind the criminal courts. It's really remarkable. But the work that we did ended up feeding into this project that we released a couple of weeks ago with NPR's Latino USA, about just what you said, how the courts are incredibly difficult to get through if you're an immigrant. And we followed the story of one family who had come from Guatemala in 2018, and were separated. The husband and wife were separated at the border, and then while the wife was released on bond and she was pregnant, the husband ended up spending months in detention and eventually getting deported because after experiencing a number of indignities across the way.
You are working with NPR on this program. It's fascinating. You could just go on npr.org. There's interviews with you, and they go through this, and Latino USA. What